This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the ACRM webinar, How to Make the Most of a Virtual Conference. I'm Stephanie Kolakowsky-Hayner, and I'm here today with Maegan Criscione and Dr. Alison Cogan. Conferences are a great way to network and earn CMEs and CEUs and stay up to date on new developments in your profession. But for some professionals, the travel time and expense can be obstacles. Virtual conferences offer the same content and CME CEU credits, but with some features that are unique to the online experience. With so many conferences happening virtually now, we need some different approaches to get the most out of education and networking offerings. In this webinar, we'll describe strategies for before, during, and after virtual conferences that will help you maximize your benefits of participating as a presenter and as an attendee. Topics that we will be addressing include networking, virtual audience interaction, and priority management. We have nothing to disclose, either financial or non-financial, and our objectives are threefold. First is to describe at least 2 strategies to use before the conference begins to prepare for a successful meeting. Next is to describe at least 2 strategies presenters can use to facilitate interaction with audience members. And lastly, to describe at least 2 strategies for effective virtual networking. First, let's review some benefits of attending a virtual conference. Virtual conferences mean lower costs because there's no travel or dining out or other expenses. Also, some virtual conferences cost less to register than in-person conferences. Another benefit, and this one's my favorite, is comfort. You can be in your own home or office, you could show up in your PJs, and you can multitask if needed. Next, training is more accessible in a virtual conference. You don't have to miss out on sessions because you can't travel or you don't have conference travel funds through work or whatever. You also have long-term access to content, allowing you time to see the content outside the conference window. You're able to go back and review content at your leisure. You don't have to worry about competing sessions, and clinicians can make their regular clinic schedules as well as view content after hours and after the conference has ended. Finally, attending virtually can actually save you time. Again, you don't have to worry about travel, so it's easier to attend a single day or to skip days if you need to. Flexible scheduling can allow you to attend at your leisure. For example, you can attend at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. depending on your own availability, not based on a rigid calendar or conference schedule. Alison's now going to discuss some of the challenges to attending a virtual conference. Alison?
Thank you, Stephanie. So as much as a conference schedule can be very flexible and allow you to attend whenever and wherever you would like, some live sessions may be based on a schedule in a time zone that doesn't match where you are. For instance, if you are in the United States and the conference is happening in Europe, or even if you're just in a different time zone within the same country, for example, Pacific time versus Eastern Standard Time. So that can be a challenge, and you may need to adjust your schedule, your normal work schedule, for the couple of days of the conference. You might also encounter technical difficulties. Sometimes if a conference platform is unfamiliar to you, you might be unfamiliar with how to navigate. If your internet connectivity is not strong or you have any interruptions with your service, that can be a problem. And sometimes conference platforms are better suited to different internet browsers. So if you're not using the right browser, you might not be getting all of the features, or some things might not work at all. And finally, institutional firewalls. So depending on your employer, there may be firewalls that prevent you from accessing certain websites, and that can be problematic. So it's best to check on these things ahead of time and try to troubleshoot in advance. And the networking experience is certainly very different in a virtual environment compared to in person. No longer will you have the accidental meetings in the hallway, run into old beloved colleagues who you haven't seen for the previous year. It definitely takes a different thought process and different approach to have a successful networking event, experience at a virtual conference. One way to mitigate some of these challenges is to plan in advance for some dedicated time and space. As Stephanie mentioned, we have the virtual conference world opens up a lot of possibilities for us to schedule when and where we want to attend. So if you have some times that you can carve out of your day and have a specific space where you can spend to do the work of the conference. And as this picture shows, similar to the one Stephanie showed a little while ago, you can also multitask if you need to. But it's great to have, if you can carve out some time and space to make the conference successful for you. I'm now going to turn it back over to Stephanie to talk about attending as a presenter.
Thank you, Alison. So here are some tips for attending as a presenter. First and foremost, you want to make sure that you watch and read all of the instructions, webinars, and materials that are provided by the organization. The best way to combat nerves about public speaking engagements is to prepare well. By structuring your presentation according to best practices, avoiding common pitfalls, and addressing your discomfort speaking in front of people, you can deliver an incisive presentation with ease. While this list that I'm about to share with you seems like a little bit of overkill, it's a good idea to go through all of the steps if you're relatively inexperienced as a public speaker. In time and with practice, much of this will come naturally to you when you're preparing for presentations, and it will become much less effort. First of all, you're going to create a thesis. If someone were to ask you, what's this presentation about, you should be able to summarize your answer in a concise sentence or two. Think about it as your elevator pitch or your 30-second commercial. If you stumble through your explanation or you ramble, you're thinking too broadly. Just like a well-written essay or article, a well-executed presentation should have a targeted aim and focus. If you're not sure if your presentation is too broad, write out your thesis. If you're hesitant or you can't summarize the subject of your presentation, rethink its breadth. Consider the top takeaways you want your audience to have at the end of the presentation and focus on those things first. Second, structure your presentation with the audience knowledge level in mind. When you are an expert on the topic, you can be so close to it that you lose touch with what is common knowledge and what isn't. Everyone has sat through a presentation where the lecturer needlessly defines basic terms, but listening to someone speak at a high level, when you have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, is just as bad. Think about who your audience is and what they are likely to know when you create your presentation. If you're talking to highly skilled professionals in a niche field, you probably don't need to define basic industry terms. However, if you're teaching someone something new to a group of people with little or no prior knowledge of the subject, explain unique terms and acronyms, even if they're old hat to you. Paste the information in digestible chunks. Third, don't overload your presentations with examples or facts. When structuring your presentation, make sure that the pacing and the order of facts and examples make sense. Inexperienced presenters often overload their audiences with facts or over-explain things by offering too many examples. Using examples to explain complicated concepts or processes is a good strategy, but make sure you're not giving examples just to give examples. When reviewing the examples, ask yourself, what will the audience learn from this example that they couldn't learn from other examples in this set? The same strategy works for facts and figures. While there are presentations that are fact and figure dense, out of necessity, offering too many pieces of ancillary evidence or information often confuses your listeners. Make sure that you balance it out. Fourth, make sure that you rehearse with your technology in advance. Even professional performers rehearse. You should rehearse early and often. and use any AV tools that you're going to be using during your rehearsals. If you're nervous about public speaking, enlist help from your family and friends. Use them as guinea pigs to see how your material is being accepted by an audience. While it's not always possible, if you could get in front of a room or a theater that you're presenting ahead of time, do so. Use those online web tools that you're going to be using the day of the conference to help rehearse. Make sure that you arrive early. If you're prone to lateness, overcompensate on the day of your presentation. Don't aim to arrive on time, aim to be 5 minutes early. Make sure that you are signed in and that you have access to all of the tools that you need. Sixth, I suggest adding a call to action. If the aim of your presentation is to spur your audience to action, whether that be buying a product, collaborating on a project, or participating in something specific, add a call to action. Calls to action are used extensively in advertising, and they typically come at the end of an ad or a piece of promotional copy. They're directive and specific in nature. Something like get involved is not a good call to action because it's not specific. A better call to action would be get involved by attending our event on May 3rd, and you could buy tickets online at this website. Make sure it's extremely specific. And last but not least, be realistic about your public speaking nerves. Public speaking is a widely held fear for most people. This information should help you feel more secure about your skills going into the presentation. The audience wants you to do well, but they also understand that you aren't a professional performer. If something glitches, you stumble over a few lines of information, or you stop to consult your notes, it's highly unlikely that the people will react negatively. Most likely, people you're presenting to will sit patiently and wait for you to regain your train of thought. This is especially true if you're new to giving presentations and it's not a primary part of your job. Some other tips and tricks for presenting include starting as early as you can. Procrastination can be deadly. Keep your slides simple and try not to be too wordy. And lastly, try to use visuals that make your presentation more engaging. After you prepare your excellent presentation, be sure to promote it. In addition to traditional word of mouth, make sure your upcoming presentations are shared on social media. Here at ACRM, the marketing department makes it easy for us by making a badge for each presentation that can be shared by the presenters. However, make sure that you tag your organization and the conference when you're sharing. So what happens the day you give your presentation? A lot of virtual conferences are pre-recorded now. It may feel awkward to record your session alone without an audience interaction. What are some ways that you can keep your interaction engaging? Firstly, smile when you're talking. It helps your voice be upbeat and engaging. Pause at certain points, just like you would during a live presentation. Maybe ask a question of the audience or have the audience perform a task or a quiz or another interactive activity. Pause to give those watching time to answer and participate. If you're presenting live or even pre-recording, make sure you familiarize yourself with the software and the programs that you're going to be using so the presentation can flow more smoothly. Maegan's now going to review some of the more technical aspects about presenting virtually. Maegan?
Thanks, Stephanie. Whether you are pre-recording your presentation or presenting live stream, there's a few technical aspects to remember and check before you start. Since you're most likely sitting in your home office or work office, there may not be an AV technician available to help troubleshoot as you would often see in live conferences. From an organization standpoint, organizers want to help on the day of, but the contact you have may not have that expertise, and it can take some time for them to find someone within the organization to help. So ensuring you've tested prior is really important. First up is your lighting. Whether you're pre-recording or presenting live, it's important that the attendees can see you well. Natural light is always going to be best, but if that's not an option, find a location where light shines brightly on your face and not from behind you. If you're using a webcam, make sure it's at eye level There's nothing worse than looking up a presenter's nose as they speak or watching them read directly from their notes. The sound, your audience wants to hear you. So use an external microphone plugin if it's possible. If you're recording with a panel, try to use that same microphone to provide consistency and avoid gaps in quality. And if you're using Bluetooth headphones, test those out first. Sometimes Bluetooth sets can cut out or distort voices, and it's better to learn that prior to your presentation date. Make sure you're facing the screen if you're on video, and make sure you're facing the microphone into which you're recording. Practice your transitions. Have a plan if you're going to play a video, open a browser window, or present in a panel. If you're presenting a video, try to have that video open on your computer already or pulled up in the browser window. Even if it's linked in your PowerPoint, you want to make sure you have a backup. And if you're doing a panel, giving one person control of the slides can help avoid that awkward transition of sharing new screens and pulling up new presentations. If you can, stand while you're recording. That helps you stay alert and energized, and it forces your body into more of a presentation-like mode. If you prefer to stay seated or you can't stand, try to lean forward, avoid slouching so that your voice comes through loud and clear. Test your internet line. If possible, plug directly into your router or into a hard line. Make sure someone else has your copy of your latest slides. If your internet fails, if your computer restarts, if you need to call into the presentation for any reason, someone else needs to be prepared to have your latest version of your slides. Q&A. Make sure that you understand if there's going to be a live audience discussion or Q&A after your presentation, and make sure you know what your responsibility is. Is there a moderator to relay the questions, or are you expected to relay the questions, review them, and answer them all at the same time? And follow the instructions on how to upload your content. So if the organization putting on the conference has you uploading your presentation or recording into an online portal, follow those instructions. From an organization standpoint, the weeks prior to the conference are very email heavy. And if you're trying to send your details via email rather than uploading, it can easily get lost. And the biggest thing, test everything. If you're pre-recording, it's pretty easy to do from your home or office prior to your presentation. But if you're live streaming your presentation, insist on a run through, or at least log in half an hour to 45 minutes early to your presentation time. If your computer blocks any of the applications the organization is using, it's usually too late to fix it 15 minutes before the presentation starts. Next up is deadlines. I know Stephanie touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's so important to keep deadlines in mind. From an organization standpoint, the deadlines are there for a reason. Most of the time, it's to ensure CE compliance is met. We want to make sure that we can offer all the credit we've advertised, and we need those details from you to ensure that. Also, keep in mind that requirements for virtual conferences are often a little bit different than the requirements for live in-person conferences. So if the deadlines seem a little bit different or the information requested is different, it's something good to keep in mind. It's also just to ensure that your presentation runs smoothly. With sometimes hundreds of presenters, it's extremely difficult to accommodate last-minute changes or additions and ensure that the presentation still runs smoothly. If you're delayed in getting your PowerPoint or pre-recorded presentation to the organizers, there's a number of things that can go wrong. When you're looking at pre-recorded presentations, there's typically limitations as to how quickly those pre-recorded presentations can actually be processed through a system and then appear on the front-end platform the attendees are using. So if you send an updated video within, say, an hour prior to your presentation, it most likely won't make it to the front end of the platform before your presentation starts. If multiple presenters need to make adjustments and each one sends or uploads a revised version, combining those presentations can take quite a bit of time, and it may not be possible to get a new version together before the presentation date and time. And then if you're relying on email to send your latest version, it can be as simple as the organizer not seeing your email until it's too late, either because they're busy or because it gets stuck in spam. But either way, your presentation isn't going to be there when you need it to be. Life does happen, so if you can't meet your deadlines, just communicate that. If the organizers know what's happening, they'll most likely be more than happy to accommodate, but letting them know ahead of time lets them plan ahead. Now let's move into how you can prepare yourself pre-conference. This applies to both attendees and presenters. The more that you can prepare in the days or weeks leading up to the conference, the better experience you'll have. You don't need to spend a lot of time preparing, just 20 to 30 minutes to familiarize yourself with what the week will look like. Many virtual conferences use an online platform that hosts all the details and the content for the conference. Take a few minutes to locate your login credentials for the online platform that the organization is using. If you're a member of the organization, it's important to remember that your conference login may be different than your membership login. After you find your login details, take time to actually log into the site. The online platforms for hosting virtual meetings are constantly evolving and changing. So even if you've used that particular platform before, they may have made updates that you will need to navigate and learn. Once you do log in, see if you can fill out your attendee profile. Many times you can fill out the information about yourself, upload your photo, select preferences, and that will help you connect with other attendees, presenters, and exhibitors who may have similar interests to you. Registration is the next big piece. When did you complete your registration? Did somebody else complete it for you? If you registered for the conference a few weeks to a few months prior, review what you registered for and quickly review the schedule to ensure the courses you intend to take are captured in your registration package. Though organizations try to make as few changes as possible to the final advertised schedule, things do happen and courses sometimes do change dates or times. Reviewing what you registered for and what you want to attend now will help reduce frustration on those first few days of the conference. Conference staff will always be there to help you make adjustments, but just remember the first few days of the conference are especially busy. So figuring out what you can adjust before that first day is going to be helpful for everyone. With so many virtual conferences happening, it may be hard to remember which format your conference is in. Take a few moments to read your emails, check out the website, and familiarize yourself with the format. Is everything pre-recorded? Are there live discussions you want to attend? Will you, as the attendee, be on camera? If so, then you can prepare your workspace and your attire for that day. And lastly, find the organization's resources. Most organizations will create tools to help you navigate the week. They may be technical documents, website navigation tutorials, introduction videos, or designated staff help rooms or email addresses. If you can't find them, just ask. More than likely, there's a web page or other dedicated area with all the resources available to help you make the most of the week. Many organizations try to differentiate between attendee resources and presenter resources to ensure you're getting the most useful information as quickly and easily as possible. From an organization standpoint, we want to provide as much material as possible to provide a seamless conference week for you. It's always discouraging to hear after the conference that attendees didn't know that we had the resources available to help them. If you can't find a particular resource or tutorial, again, just ask. Some staff and volunteers in the organization can get so embedded in the details that they might not see a missing piece that would be helpful to those attending the course. Now I'm going to pass it over to Alison to talk about the week of the conference.
Thank you, Megan. So often when we have a conference schedule in front of us, such as this one from the ACRM annual meeting, the choices can be overwhelming. And there's absolutely no way any of us could attend all of the sessions. Even a single track, we might be not able to manage all of them because there's just so much. So it's really important to prioritize to avoid getting overwhelmed. It's important to check, as Megan was just mentioning, whether the format is a live stream or pre-recorded. And often as the ACRM conference, there's a combination of both. So some events are happening live and many others are pre-recorded, and there may be a live Q&A. So when developing your conference schedule, prioritize those live sessions where it's important for you to be there, that a speaker that you really want to hear or connect with. Likewise, even for pre-recorded presentations, there are opportunities to chat with the presenters, and So there may be specific people you're looking to network with. So here's an opportunity to make that happen in real time. On the other hand, there may be presentations where you have an interest in learning about the subject matter, but have a lower priority for networking or don't expect to have as many questions. And those you can plan to view after hours or even after the conference has ended. The important thing is to come up with a schedule that works for you when you're available to attend the conference. It's also important to take some breaks. So most virtual conferences do have short breaks, often 10 to 15 minutes in between sessions, and often a longer meal break midday. And just as you would in a live conference in person, make sure you take that time to get some water, get a cup of coffee, go for a short walk, do a little bit of movement. And in fact, with so many of us spending a lot of time in front of our computers and on virtual meetings, a lot of the time, these are good practices to incorporate into your day anyway. So make sure you know when those breaks are happening in the conference schedule and plan to move around a little bit, get something to eat, get something to drink, and get yourself refreshed and prepared for the next session. Virtual networking. So there are a couple approaches to making this happen. Often virtual conferences still have virtual networking events incorporated, whether those be a less formal reception or a kind of an online meeting like a Zoom session where you might have an opportunity to connect with individuals in your field that are from other institutions or other geographic areas that you normally wouldn't be able to connect with. It's great to have some things, if you have specific questions for people or topics that you would like to connect with them on, have those prepared. You don't always know who's going to be in the networking sessions, so but it's good to plan to show up for them and try to make some new connections, or even to reconnect with people you've already met. It's also great a practice to follow up with people outside of the networking session. If you connected with somebody, say on a Zoom chat, to follow up with an email after the fact to build that relationship. As I mentioned, another opportunity for virtual networking is to engage in the chat or Q&A sessions that are live alongside presentations during the conference. And another approach is also to use social media. Conferences usually have a hashtag, so you can look at the hashtag, you can look at the organizational posts, see who else is attending, comment on other people's posts, you can share your own posts on Twitter or Facebook or whatever other social media platforms the conference uses. So it's a little bit different than in person, but there are still a lot of great opportunities. So one of the benefits, as we mentioned earlier, of being able to attend conferences from home comes with the challenge of balancing the rest of your work and life. An advantage of traveling to a conference is that we can often leave some of our work tasks behind, and that can feel more challenging when you're still at home or in your office rather than at a conference site. So again, we have to think about our priorities. We might be able to set aside particular times a day to catch up on emails for work, or if there are other emergent tasks that need to happen. It's also a good strategy to just let people know that you'll be attending a virtual conference, and perhaps setting up an out of office message to let people know that you may be delayed in responding to their emails during the course of the virtual conference. And certainly we all have life things that we have to take care of, just in taking care of ourselves and our families. And occasionally those are, of course, going to take priority over attending the conference. And again, letting your family members know that you're attending the conference, asking them for, to give you that time to attend and make the most of it. But we all have to make those adjustments on a day-to-day basis. So whatever structures you can set up in advance to help make that happen, are always helpful, but then we always have to adjust in the moment. And post-conference, it's very important to follow up. So if you've attended a session that you have great interest in or connected with people in a networking session, it's important to follow up, send an email, follow people on social media, and make whatever connections you can to strengthen those initial connections that you made in the conference. And now I am turning it back over to Stephanie.
I think Megan's going to take the end of this.
I apologize. I'm turning it back over to Megan.
No problem. All right, so make sure that post-conference, you want to make sure you're filling out those conference evaluations, whether it's just the organization evaluation, your CME questionnaires, all the evaluations are there for a reason. If you can, provide that constructive feedback. From an organization standpoint, we really want to know what would be more beneficial to you as a user. Try to let us know both the positives and the negatives of what you experienced. It really helps when we're planning for future events to both understand what you really look forward to and also understand what we could have done better. And then, as mentioned, one of the biggest benefits to virtual conferences is that ability to watch the content you missed at a later date. So do a little research, find out how long the conference organizers are planning to keep that content live. That way you know how long you have to plan to watch it. Schedule out time in your calendar to watch the pre-recorded content you missed or content you'd like to review again. It's a whole lot easier to make time to do that if you're scheduling it into your week. Many times live discussions or Q&As will actually be recorded during the event, and at times the conference organizers will upload those to the conference platform after the event. So if you missed a live discussion, check to see if it was recorded and uploaded after the fact. Also check the organization's website for any tips and tricks they may have put together that are specific to that conference that you attended. They may have a list of exactly what to do post-conference to help you make the most of it. And that wraps up the webinar on how to make the most of a virtual conference. Thank you for joining and setting aside your time in your schedule to listen in. Now we'll open it up to any questions you might have.
And if you do have a question, please feel free to use the chat.
So Brian says, great presentation. As ACRM and other conferences move to hybrid formats, do any of the speakers have any comments on the pros and cons of attending a hybrid conference in person versus virtually?
So I think I can take this one a little bit initially. I think some of the the hybrid conferences, you're going to see both a virtual component and a live in-person component. And the virtual aspects, you're going to see a lot of what we talked about here, but for attending in person, you're going to get a lot of those benefits that you would of an in-person conference. So chances are you're going to be able to network with people on site. You're going to be able to potentially see presenters, see, get some of those connections that you wouldn't be able to get virtually. But then you also get the benefits of a virtual conference where you're also going to have access to those presentations after the fact that you may have missed. So you're not only going to get the benefits of the on-site, but you get the benefits of the virtual as well.
Does anyone have any other questions or comments? Brian says, great, thanks. Will ACRM include information about who is attending in person versus virtually? I think this is another Megan. Do you mean like share our conference attendee list?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to.
Typically, we don't share an attendee list.
Do
you mean ahead of time whose presentations will be live, whose presentations will be virtual?
And if so, I think we are going to do our best to, to designate and make sure that the attendees know which presenters will be, live in person and which presenters will be virtual. It's something that we may not know, until a little bit closer to the conference, but we're going to do our very best to make sure those attending in person, know who will be there in person so that they can prioritize while they're on site at the conference.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. And Brian says, perfect, thanks. Is there any other questions or comments? Well, thank you again for attending. We really appreciate it and hope you can take some of these tips and tricks back with you to your own virtual conferences. Don't forget the ACRM spring meeting will be virtual this year from March 18th to the 20th of 2021. And you can find information about that at acrm.org/spring meeting. Also, our Dallas conference for our annual conference will be held September 24th to the 29th of 2021. Our call for proposals is still open for symposia and papers and posters, so please check out acrm.org/call. Thank you and have a great day.